Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Pineapple Headache.
Hello.
Today, we're going to bring up a very hot button issue
Yes.
that I'm sure Madison would love to share her thoughts and feelings about.
Yes. Well, Christiane approached me with the topic, and I was just like, yes, this sounds great. Let's just burn some bridges today.
Yeah, and I think with the rise of a very good TV show that is on right now on Disney Plus, I thought it was worth mentioning everything else that came before it. As we all know, WandaVision is amazing. Very
Yes.
good. I love the originality of the concept, and I'm really enjoying it so far.
Finally, something that is not just the same Marvel formula, basically.
But before that, let's go back to how many Marvel movies are there, Madison? Guide
Uh,
us through this whole thing.
well, okay, to give context to this, uh, I recently finally made my own Marvel Cinematic Universe movie tier list. So I don't know if people are familiar with like just categorizing things in tiers. Like S tier is the best, then A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier in terms of quality and all that. I don't know how many. Let me just count how many MCU movies there are. I think there's 23 right now,
Okay.
not counting Black Widow since that's just somewhere.
That's just delayed indefinitely. I don't know why they keep delaying it. We could have watched it on Disney Plus and spent the
I
$30
listen.
already,
I
but
would
no.
have paid the $30 because I'm that much of a clown, but they're not even giving me the chance to. So that's on them.
Okay. Okay, well let's throw it back because Madison is more of a Marvel fan than I am. I feel like I want to be in the loop when it comes to Marvel, but I feel like you get into it a lot more than I do. So go ahead and
Yes.
talk about, what was it about Marvel that you really love about it, how you started, and your participation within the
Oh
fandom.
yeah. So my Marvel origin story. I think technically the first Marvel movie I ever saw was Iron Man, like the first Iron Man, not in theaters, but one of the times it was on TV, just like a rerun or whatever. Because I think, because like at the time, like late 2000s, like Iron Man was kind of like this groundbreaking, like, oh, we're finally at a time when like we can make superhero movies that don't visually look hilarious because we actually now have like believable special effects and all that. And so
Right.
my dad grew up reading comics, so he was like, and he's like just kind of casual fan or whatever. So he just turned it on because it was on. He was like, oh, like let's see this. So I saw parts of Iron Man, and I was like, okay, that's cool, or whatever. And then the first film I actually saw in theaters was Avengers in 2012 without much context, but it was just, one of those. I was in middle school, about to be in high school. My friends wanted to go to the movies, and I said yes, and they chose Avengers. And I was like, sure. I don't really know what's going on, but okay. So I watched that in theaters, and I was like, okay, this is like fun or whatever. Then we went home, and I was like, I don't really know who these characters are. And so the friends I went with, since I was still hanging out with them, we then like watched the first Captain America movie. So I was like, oh, okay, that's like interesting, cool. And then in 2013, the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started, and one of my friends at school was like, I really want to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I guess I just really wanted to feel like I fit in with people at school. So I was like, yeah, I'll watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So then I watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I was like, oh, that's cool. Yep. But then the real obsession started after I saw Captain America the Winter Soldier in theaters in 2014. And the reason I saw it in theaters was because I was still following Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And at the time, like during the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is on ABC, like they actually correlated with the movies. Like it, like literally, like, an episode would come out on like Tuesday, and then if a movie was coming out that weekend, that following Tuesday, that episode was gonna relate to what, like, it was gonna connect to whatever happened with the movie, like, in the weekend. For example, Thor 2 came out in the middle of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and so, like, one week they were just living life, then the next week they're, like, in London cleaning up after the events of Thor. So it was kind of like, oh, I need to, like, watch what's happening. Like, I need to see what's going on with this Captain America movie to understand what's happening in S.H.I.E.L.D., because as we all know, Captain America was, like, the whole Hydra thing, and they had started kind of building up to it in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and so and they actually included like parts of the movie and like the ending of like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to be like, oh shit, stuff's about to go down from this movie that's gonna like turn the whole show upside down. And it was done really well, at least from what I remember, so it was really fun. But so then I just got really into Steve as a character, and especially like Natasha, Black Widow. I was just like in love with her basically from that point forward. And then I was really into shipping Steve and Natasha. Not sure I stand by that anymore because the fans back then they were a little much. They were very thirsty. They were very horny about it. There was also a lot of people who were like took it to the level of we also ship Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson in real life, which like don't do that. At the time, Scarlett Johansson I think was engaged or whatever to I don't remember his name, but the guy she had a baby with. So like no, but so yeah. So then from that point on, I joined Marvel fandom on like Tumblr, and so I was like, and then I got super into writing fan fiction, which is actually how I decided I wanted to become a writer or whatever, because I was basically just spending all my free time writing fan fiction about the Avengers. And this was back in wholesome times before there was any Civil War or any Thanos. Like back then, like Avengers fandom, like we all were like, this is a found family, and in their free time the Avengers are just chilling at the tower from the Avengers movie, and like Hawkeye's hiding in the vents, Thor's eating Pop-Tarts. It was just a really wholesome time. And then as the MCU went on, it just tested me more and more. I'm somehow still here, but I do feel very burnt out after this whole last decade.
Oh my gosh, so like you're saying the Avengers is what got you into screenwriting.
Yes, and
Do we have to thank the Avengers for forming our friendship? Because then you wouldn't
oh
have
my
gotten
God.
to the film
Specifically,
school.
okay, it was specifically the Winter Soldier film. Like the Avengers movie did not do it, even though I was there. I saw it.
Okay,
But
so
Winter
we have to
Soldier.
thank the Russo brothers for bringing me and Madison together.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I was like, yeah, Avengers for like a while, and then I saw Guardians of the Galaxy which also came out that year, and I was like, okay, they're cool. And then when Guardians 2 came out in 2017, I was like, you know what? These movies are actually really good. The Avengers movies are actually kind of bad. So then I basically was like, no more Avengers fandom, and I just went to the Guardians fandom, and I was like, I don't want to interact with any more Avengers people, I'm done. And I just hung out there, and that also just kind of got blown up by Infinity War and Endgame, so now I just exist waiting for this silly little Black Widow movie that's never gonna come out, even though it's been done for a long time now. But yeah, now we're here, now I have a screenwriting degree because I just really wanted to write fanfic about Captain America and Black Widow falling in love when I was 16, so decisions were made.
Amazing. What a great origin story.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as you can tell, Madison has had a long history with Marvel.
Yep.
And their movies. Also in quarantine, we actually had one of our roommates actually had never seen a Marvel movie prior to quarantine when all of us were living together. So, like, there was a period of nights when Marvel movies were on, and we were just going through all of the phases, watching all the movies, and I jumped in whenever I could.
Yeah,
but it was an enjoyable time.
Slash for whatever movies you would actually want to see, because like it was fun to do a marathon, but we also had to kind of expedite it a little bit because we had like limited time and we were still like busy with school and stuff. We had to just like, we were only all like super free at like nighttime and stuff. And then also it was like we didn't have, I think, a ton of time before we were moving out to do it. And it's like, 20 whatever films, so that's like a lot. I like have my own little personalized order that I curated for us to go in, semi-based on release order, semi-based on this is when it takes place chronologically in the MCU, and then we would skip ones that I could just summarize in like a sentence, or like slash that were very bad, such as Thor 2.
Yeah.
And I don't think we missed any of that. I think we actually, except for like one movie on my D tier, the bottom tier on my list, I think we skipped all of the movies on my D tier, except for one.
Okay.
So, that tells you something.
Alright, so then let's just go ahead and go into your list then.
I feel like it'll just be easiest if we go top to bottom, because, like, there's more on the bottom, so then it's like, we can just kind of skip through those. Like, I think we should give all our energy to these ones at the top, because, like, and I'll just like name each one in the order I put it, because I can't visually communicate this to whoever's listening.
Okay.
But so the top movie on my tier list is obviously Black Panther from 2018.
Oh, for sure.
Because
For sure. Black
what?
Panther is like the best Marvel movie
It's like
made thus
objectively
far.
the best. Like, I will always have that personal connection to Winter Soldier as a favorite because of how much it, like, not to be like, it changed my life, but it did send me in, like, several directions, obviously. So, like, I gotta hand it to Winter Soldier for that. But, like, Black Panther definitely blows it out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, the cultural phenomenon of that movie is one thing, but also looking into the craft of filmmaking in that
Yeah.
movie is something to really behold. Like, Ryan Coogler's direction in creating a whole world that
Mm-hmm.
is, just like like in an Afro-futuristic style is something that is so different than what Marvel has been doing and trying to bring Wakanda to life. It's just so
Mm-hmm.
admirable having Black Panther be, in the running for Oscars and like
Yeah.
actual awards. And also, I watched Black Panther on the beach at Cannes. I remember that.
Oh my
Like,
god,
Ryan
yes.
Coogler was there watching the movie with me, and I was at the beach watching it with him.
You're
Yeah.
personally sitting next to him on this beach, just watching
We were in the same audience
it.
watching his
I
movie.
wish that was me. Like, it's literally just so good. Like, there's a reason that it's the only MCU film to be nominated for Best Picture. Like, I don't think any of the others would deserve to be nominated for Best Picture ever.
I know it. I think it did win for wardrobe though.
Yeah, and
I mean,
I'm
like with all the clothes that they're wearing, like
yeah.
of course.
Yeah, and also the main like costume designer person on Black Panther was Filipino, so it was like
Oh wow.
so a lot of like the like I guess quote unquote like tribal wear of like the characters in the movie was also especially like the Dora Milaje, like the female security detail that T'Challa has,
Hmm.
like that Okoye is, like their armor think is based on like ancient like Philippine like female warrior armor or something like that. So there's
Oh,
like
okay.
it's like a mix of like African influence but also just like historic Philippine like clothing and stuff too. So that's really cool.
Oh, that's cool. And then I was also gonna note, like, I think objectively, Killmonger is the best
Yes.
Marvel villain.
Oh my god,
Like,
yes. I stand so
he
hard.
presented a lot of moral dilemmas that I really think tested T'Challa's character and development. And I mean, he wasn't wrong by the things he was saying. He was just going against what T'Challa's, desires and intentions are, which is what you want in a good antagonist. Like,
Mhm.
you want someone to challenge it, but a really good antagonist is one who morally, challenges what's the word? Like the moral laws that the protagonist
Mhm.
upholds. So,
Yeah, it was just I just thought that was so well done because it was like it's really easy to like agree with like his ideas and not like the execution stuff. Like it's like I always feel like if I'm watching something and like because I've never been like someone who can like easily like villains as characters. Like a lot of people like love Loki, and I was like I don't get it. Like he just kind of existed for me or whatever. But like with Killmonger, like I was actually really conflicted, like and actually like when he like died, I was actually pretty like, is there no other way that he could like stay alive? Like if I actually get that,
right.
like wow, I wish that the villain had survived. Like clearly someone was doing something right there to get me to be like, wow, I'm sad that the villain died. And I think another really like interesting and important part of it was the fact that like Killmonger and Nakia's character, like they had the same exact goal. Like they were both saying the same exact thing of like, why don't we distribute our resources across the world? Why don't we lend our help to like people who are in these situations where they're being oppressed and like we come in and help them like liberate themselves stuff. Like they basically wanted the same thing, but like Nakia just didn't want to do it the way like Killmonger did and stuff. So like in a way, like Killmonger's like influence in his like ideas like still like, lived on in the end because then T'Challa like made amends with Nakia and was like putting her in charge of like their outreach and stuff. So like
Hmm.
clearly that solved that because it was like he brought up a valid issue that did need to be addressed and stuff, and then it was addressed and it was dealt with, and I'm like really interested to see like what happens in like the future Black Panther films, though obviously it's going to be very sad because of Chadwick Boseman, but I really have hope and faith that they'll still make something really cool.
Since it's a Marvel movie, like it's part of this entire universe. And then you have Ryan Coogler, who's made his movies like Fruitvale Station and Creed and all those. And it's like when you watch Black Panther, you can still hear his distinct voice in his direction and his writing. And like you can see kind of his attention to like sound design and how he created this world and stuff. So it's like, I don't know, Marvel, I feel like more so Marvel should really lean into directors who have unique voices, because obviously like that's gonna make fans a lot more happier with what they're gonna see because it's different and not, like you said, not the same formulaic
Mhm.
Marvel film that we're so used to seeing. And I'm like,
Especially considering it's like a solo film, because like as a slight spoiler for my tier list, a lot of just like the solo character films of the MCU are towards the bottom of my list, because just I feel like just so many of them are literally like the exact same story. Like, and
hmm
this is coming from someone who like knew these characters inside and out for years, because I was writing stories about them, and I was to the point where I like had to know them as if they were my own. But like their origin movies are literally all the same. Like, I'm sorry, but that's
okay.
just the truth.
Okay, so then let's keep going into your list. So like what
Yes.
else is on
So
your list?
right after Black Panther is Thor Ragnarok, because AKA as I like to call it, they finally made the Thor franchise interesting and finally redeemed it, because oh my god, like I always like liked Thor as a character, and I always loved like, you know, writing him and stuff, but it was like literally his own movies like treated him, that whole franchise, as like a joke, which like to a point it was like kind of a joke, but like at times it would like take it too seriously when it's like kind of like they just didn't have a good
hmm
approach, I feel like, with the first two Thor
Yeah.
movies and in the Avengers movies. So Taika really came in and like literally
Yeah.
saved this franchise, because Thor finally felt like an actual character.
Again, like that's the whole thing with trying to pick the right director for the right
Mhm.
project, because Taika Waititi's movies, before he ever made a Marvel movie, always were able to strike that balance between comedy and like dealing with very deep and, deep and serious issues that he talks about. And so it's just like,
Yeah.
again, the people that you pick for a Marvel movie can really make or break the film. I didn't see Thor 2. It's been a while since I've seen Thor, but like I don't really have any recollection of it. So,
They literally, like, I've seen both of them multiple times, and they still just blend together in my head, because they're literally like the exact same like basic
hmm
movie and stuff, and like the same tone and everything, and just the characters just didn't really stand out and stuff. But like in Ragnarok, I really was like, I felt like I actually had a grasp on like, okay, this is who Thor is, this is who Loki is, this is like what this world is and all that, because this all the previous movies just literally did not do it for me.
yeah.
So I was like, yes. And also because, like, I've seen also, like, analyses of, like, Ragnarok as, like, an indigenous story. Like, not in the sense that it actually, like, you know, represents any, like, particular indigenous group or anything like that. But just, like, you can tell that it was coming from that perspective, because Taika is indigenous. Because the whole point of, like, you know, the, like, movie is that Asgard is not a place, it's a people. And so, like, that whole, like, you
hmm
can just, like, this is just, like, when you like let movies that have a lot of white people in it, if you let someone who's not white direct it, like it will probably be better, and it'll probably have like more character and like more like something more profound or something, just based on the MCU at least. Like it'll just have some more depth to it.
I mean, yeah, based on the two movies that we've described so far and how much like we really like them, it seems like it's following that trend.
Yep.
Okay, let's go ahead and let's go keep going down the list.
So Winter Soldier is next for obvious reasons. Or now, as I
hmm
like to call it, imagine being the Russo brothers and peaking in your first Marvel movie, and then immediately going downhill from there.
Well, I guess that foreshadows what you think about all the other movies that the Russo brothers have made within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So let's keep going down the line then as we keep
Yes,
going through
okay,
all of their
so
movies.
Guardians is next. AKA because my thing with the Guardians of the Galaxy films, which also just since Guardians 2 comes right after this, it's the beginning of A tier, so they're basically next to each other in my list. They're just not in the same tier. Literally, Guardians in one film managed to do what the Avengers films did not do for an entire decade, which is really actually being like, okay, this is a found family story and this is like an ensemble film. The
hmm
Avengers movies, which I guess I'll get into more later, but like literally they're just like coworkers who hate each other the whole time. So, like, when am I supposed to, why, like, I'm like, how am I supposed to feel as emotionally invested as the story wants me to feel if they've never shown me that these people actually have a profound connection to each other? Meanwhile, in the Guardians film, like, they're very clearly a family by the end of the movie and stuff, with, they still have, like, obviously they still have their conflicts and their problems, which Guardians 2 highlights and deals with pretty well. The humor is, like, fun, though some of it I'm kind of like, like, I really hate how Drax treats Mantis for the entirety of the second movie. I also don't love Drax that much, to be honest. My OTP, my one true pairing in the Marvel movies, is Star-Lord and Gamora, because I feel like they have, like, one of the most actual, like, organic and well-paced and nice, like, love stories in the films. Like, obviously, I guess there's also, like, Tony and Pepper, but, like Peter and Gamora are, like, two lead hero characters compared to, like, Tony's the hero and Pepper's, like, his girl that's, like, a normal person. But, like, in terms of an actual story of here's two, like, superhero characters who are, like, stars, and then they're, like, getting together, I really enjoyed, like, their arc together over the Guardians movies. So I was like, yes, for that. And also because I liked a lot that Gamora was, like, she had a pretty, like, good fleshed out thing where she was really badass and she was really tough and she could be cold, but she was also funny. She was warm to the Avengers at times. She was really, or the Avengers. She was very warm to the Guardians at times. She was very motherly to Groot when he was baby Groot in the second movie. Like, she actually had a full personality and she wasn't just a standoffish badass woman like literally every movie made Natasha to be. So, like, thanks, like, Jesus Christ, I don't know why only one series got that right, but shout out to Guardians for that.
All right, and it is directed by the controversial James Gunn,
which I'm not jazzed about him as a person for obvious reasons, but also I was just telling Christian before this that, I mean, obviously I trusted his direction with these movies until I think yesterday or the day before on Twitter he decided to share that his favorite scene in Infinity War was Gamora's death scene, which I no longer trust him for Guardians 3. So goodbye Guardians franchise, I guess.
It was nice while it lasted. It was like, I really did like his writing that he had for Guardians 1 and Volume 2. Like, I feel like there was a sense of maturity compared to his past films that he's made.
Oh, also, like, Gamora and Nebula's whole arc in Volume 2 as, like, the whole sister thing, that was great. Like, literally anyone who has a sister, like, knows, like, would you fly across the entire universe just to prove a point to your sister? Yes. Just to say, I told you so? Like, obviously. That's just how it is, and that's, like, clearly he understood that and, like, got that really right with their characters. And I also really love Nebula and stuff too, and, like, I love those characters a lot. Next on my list is the two Ant-Man movies with Ant-Man and the Wasp on, like, before. Also, Captain Marvel's in this tier. We're on A tier now. And I just want to say the only reason these three films are here are not because I think they're just these A tier films that are, like, I walked out of the theater being like, oh my god, I just saw, like, an Oscar-worthy film. Like, it was nothing like that. It was just, I just felt like I had less problems with these movies than the ones all below it. And when I was making this, I had already put all these movies into the lower tiers, and I was like, well, I don't think these movies are A tier, but I don't think they belong with these other movies that I put in, so I guess they're just gonna have to be A tier just by process of elimination.
So well, I think they're there. Yeah, well, I think with, like, Ant-Man, because I know I've seen Ant-Man and the Wasp with you in theaters, and, like, I think that both Ant-Man movies are just okay. Like, I really do like Paul Rudd as Ant-Man and Scott Lang, but they're fun, and I feel like they're fun to watch in the moment, but by the time I finish the movie, it's not like I leave, like, with a lot of memory of it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
It's,
like,
just not as memorable to me.
It doesn't, yeah, it's not memorable. It's, like, it doesn't stick in my mind, like, the way that, like, the, like, some of the, like, Avengers films or the Guardians films did, like, where I left it and I was, like, thinking about these characters and thinking about, like, the deeper implications and all that. I just thought they were funny and they flowed well, and they were still pretty, like, they were still kind of formulaic, but they didn't feel as much of, like, a copy and paste as some of the other films. So
yeah. And then Captain Marvel, because I know how much you love Brie Larson.
Yes, Brie Larson, if you are listening, I am free tomorrow. at any time. Brie Larson, if you're listening, I hope we can hang out. I am free whenever you are. Just please hit me up, Brie Larson.
Yeah, my thing with Captain Marvel, going back to the conversation, my thing with Captain Marvel is I think it was a movie that was made that should have been made earlier,
Yeah.
like way earlier in time, because I understand that's giving this message of like feminism and whatnot, but it's also pretty white woman
It
feminism.
was Women's March the movie, basically.
Yeah.
Which is like cool. Like I didn't have a ton of like, oh, this was like not memorable or this is boring problems with Captain Marvel. Like it just, I was like, yeah, it just exists, and I just really like Brie Larson. But I also just really, I did really enjoy like her dynamic with Nick Fury in
Hmm.
it, and of course
I think I
Goose
did.
the
Yeah,
cat. There's a cat in the there's an orange cat in the movie, and I have a dumb orange cat in real life, so I'm a little biased there as well.
so let's go on to, I guess, the movies that you have problems with now.
Yeah, the B tier. Well, that's like
Hmm.
B tier is like middle of the road for me. It's like either I'm like I just don't really love this or I'm like neutral on it. So first of all, Avengers 2012 is in here, and this is the highest ranked Avengers film on this list. Is the first one by our favorite Joss Whedon.
Oh yes, Joss Whedon, the director that everyone, the writer director that everyone wants to work with. He's so respectful
Oh my god.
to the people he collaborates
To
with,
women.
the women he collaborates with. I'm sure all of you have, or maybe y'all have not, but as we're talking today, there has been an article that just came out about the Buffy the Vampire Slayer actors coming out speaking out against Joss Whedon while they were working with him, talking about how he's abusive.
So
I'm
yeah.
also just not a fan of his writing
Yeah,
either.
like
Like,
his
so.
the way he like I was telling Christian before this like with like the things that have come out about how he is to work with in real life and how he is as a person, like they never surprise me because I feel like if you just watch, like, I mean, obviously I've never watched Buffy and I've never watched Firefly, but just from watching the first two Avengers movies, like that those qualities about him like are reflected in there to me.
Mhm.
Like he like because I really hate how, like, I think this is why Natasha was just written so not great for most of the MCU and why they just never really tapped into her whole character potential for all of her movies, is because of how she was like set up in the Avengers movies. Like cuz he basically writes her as this like standoffish, cold, badass like bitch where it's like, ooh, she's this super spy who can like murder you in 5 seconds, when it's like, as proven by her actions in Endgame, even though I hated the execution of that, like she would do anything to keep the Avengers together. She like had this whole dynamic with Tony from Iron Man 2. Like she has like an actual like team player who just really wants to keep her family together. But no, she's instead introduced as this like, I hate everyone mood and I'll just kill anybody for looking at me, blah 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 blah, this and that, and I'm just really sexy, blah blah blah, like that kind of thing. She's like introduces that in the Avengers movie, and then also just the way all the men are written in the movie. Like I always tell like people that I'm like I think the first Avengers movie is really nostalgic and really fun, but I just, the dialogue just makes me cringe so much. There's just like so many little things where I'm just like, what, like the jokes in there, like half of Tony's lines I'm just like, what? Like, remember when Tony and Steve were just like, put on the suit or take off the suit? Whatever. What are you? You everything special came out of you. Everything special about you came out of a bottle. Like, why don't you put on the suit? Let's go a few rounds. Like, like that whole banter thing. I was just like, okay, it's just men being aggressively men. And like one of my biggest gripes with the first Avengers movie is this was the first film I saw with Captain America in it, and I was under the impression that he was a complete asshole with a stick up his butt, and he was just a stick in the mud, and he was just like not fun or anything. Like he literally had like no personality in the Avengers movie. He literally just stood there and was emo for like 2 hours until he finally like led the Avengers. And so I was kind of like, wow, he kind of sucks. But then when my friends showed me Captain America, the first Avenger, at home later after we saw Avengers, I was like, oh, he's like an actual person with an actual personality and actual like goals and like actual flaws. But like he was just not introduced well to me at all in this movie. So, and I know for a lot of people, the Avengers film was like the first movie they saw in the MCU because it was so popular and a lot of people got like brought in there, but like it just did not do a good job of like introducing characters. So all in all, this is just a anti Joss Whedon message, because I think the movie was strong for what it did, and obviously, like, as much as I criticize the MCU, I do think for the whole concept of why don't we have a bunch of random movies that connect and like cross over and tell one story, I think overall it does, like, the MCU did succeed in that, and I think it did like well as for what it was. But like these problems, when you get like deeper into it and when you get into the fandom, when you start like thinking about it more and the characters, you're just like, wow, this could have been a lot better too. So the next movie is Infinity War, 'cause I think I was not a big Infinity War stan, but once I saw Endgame, I was like, Infinity War was at least cohesive and I could understand what was going on with everything going on. So I was like, Infinity War is impressive for that. So I respect her for that, but obviously I hate what they did with the Guardians in the movie. The whole thing with Gamora and Thanos, disgusting. They never explained the Soul Stone, and they were just like, we're just using the Soul Stone as an excuse to kill women, I guess, and fridge them on this planet. So the whole
I
Gamora
remember,
thing.
yeah, I remember we had watched that in theaters and we looked so, I remember after the movie, we looked so disheveled
I
after
know.
watching it. And I also remember sitting next to you when Gamora died because I know that is one of your, like, top
Yes.
favorite superheroes within the Marvel universe. So I was just like, what?
I
And
was
you were also like, what?
I was like, what? Oh, wait till we get to Endgame. I'm sure you remember my reaction to Endgame during that
Yeah.
scene
Mm-hmm.
with somebody else. But so all in all, Infinity War tried. I think for what it had, like how many characters and how many stories it was trying to tell, I think it did a decent job. Oh, and then obviously, I have to establish that I do not blame Peter Quill for the whole snap happening, as everybody in the world likes to do. Like, why would you waste your time doing that when Peter was literally about to shoot Gamora in the face to save the universe? Meanwhile, the Avengers on Earth couldn't bear to kill their smart toaster Vision, so like the whole world really ended because the Avengers couldn't just kill their robot guy. And in the process, they were like, why don't we take the fight to Wakanda? So they also did a great job at minimizing the entirety of Black Panther to just a backdrop to be destroyed for this final battle. So that's great. And then the snap literally killed most of the newer characters, who happen to, of course, be the more diverse characters. So that was also great. Also, I hate that they killed Shuri off screen. Like, remember when Shuri just wasn't shown again in the final battle? And then right before
Mm-hmm.
Endgame came out, Marvel was like, oh yeah, she died too. Cool, I guess. But yeah, so that's a summary of all my Infinity War thoughts. Next on my list is both Spider-Man movies, and they are the ones that are here because I'm just very neutral on them and have no opinion because I have not seen them that many times. I think I've seen the first one like once or twice, and then Far From Home I've only seen with Christian in theaters once, and I have not watched it since because it's like not streaming anywhere I have. So
I mean, it's, yeah, it's kind of the same thing to me. Like, they are just
they exist.
okay.
They just kind of exist because also like I know a lot of people are like big Spider-Man like stans in general because just like they loved Spider-Man growing up or they liked the Andrew Garfield or like Tobey Maguire movies or whatever. But I was like, no, I never watched them, so I was just kind of like, Peter Parker exists. Yeah, I mean, I like Peter Parker as a character, and he just, yep, he's there. So those are like literally just the middle of my tier list, just because I'm like, yeah, cool. Zendaya, obviously, very cool though. Zendaya, if you're free to hang out, I'm free whenever you are free to hang out. Okay.
Okay.
Next is Civil War, which I like in my, even though it's a Captain America movie, I just kind of lump it in with the Avengers films in my head. So it has very similar problems to all that. I think this is my main gripe with Civil War has to do with the Avengers movies before it, and kind of going back to the whole thing of like they never really established that the Avengers actually like each other or like are friends. Like Steve and Natasha are friends, and I think that's like kind of the only ones that are really established to have a real relationship thanks to Winter Soldier. Like Steve and Tony are never like really made it to be these BFFs in the movies.
Yeah, I
So
mean, like when we were when we watched Civil War, I was just like looking at the relationship. I was like, okay, and
yeah, like cuz
should I care?
like I haven't, obviously caveat, I haven't read all the comics. I've only read a couple, and I've never read the Civil War comics, but just from conversations I had with people in high school when this movie was coming out who had read it, it was like the whole tragedy of it originally was kind of like, because in the comics, like, Steve and Tony have a much more like fleshed out relationship and are, it's, you know, it's a lot more complicated, but like more, the tragedy just really centers on, we were like this family, we were really good friends, and now we're like standing on opposite sides on this issue, and it's like a life or death thing, and now we're like fighting about it and all that. And like the movies just never laid the groundwork for that. Like, they were already fighting in Age of Ultron. They laid the groundwork for them just fighting. They never laid the groundwork for like they actually had a real relationship, and now it's really tragic that like they're breaking up over this, you know. So like that was I enjoyed the airport fight scene when they're all fighting each other, because I thought it was fun, and that was the only part of the movie where I felt like it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of tragic, like when they went from just fighting like kind of not lethally to like, okay, now we're gonna kill each other. But then the entire third act I thought was kind of boring, so because it was just like Steve and Tony being emo, and then like they're with Bucky, and then it's the whole Bucky killing Tony's parents reveal, which like, yeah, I guess. But so yeah, I was just like, all right, I don't know. It was just a lot of man pain for like the last like 40 minutes, and I was like, eh. Also, again, the Sokovia Accords, tell me when that ever mattered again. It literally never came up again, period. Like, the only thing I think it kind of referenced it, aside from, like, the way, like, Steve and Nat and, like, Sam and some of those, like, and Wanda, like, they were all, like, hiding, I guess, living in hiding at the beginning of Infinity War, and then it was, like, Wanda has to just check in. When else did it matter? It literally did not matter ever again. Like, did they ever bring it up in a Spider-Man movie? No. What? Like, they never brought it up in any of the films after Civil War. Like, nobody has gotten arrested for breaking the Sokovia Accords, so they basically literally just used it just to set up for, like, Infinity War and Endgame, so that, oh no, like, the Avengers broke up, so now they can't fight together for Infinity War or whatever. But, like, did it need to happen if the Sokovia Accords didn't matter? Okay, I don't know. So that's my Civil War T, and that's the end of the B tier. The C tier starts with Endgame, which is, first of all, why was that 3 hours long?
Yeah, I mean, Infinity War was also 3 hours long.
No, Infinity War was like 2 hours and something. Like, Endgame was over 3 hours, like, actually 3 hours
Okay.
something. And when I first heard it was 3 hours, I was like, I'm gonna predict now that I'm gonna watch it and I'm gonna think this did not need to be 3 hours. And you know what happened? I watched it and I thought, this did not need to be 3 hours. Surprise, surprise. So, that's cool, I guess. But like, I liked the concept of like, okay, now it's all coming back down to the original 6 Avengers to figure it out. But like, the pacing was like literally just so bad. Like, I've like rewatched like all of the Avengers movies multiple times before. I've seen a lot of the Marvel movies. I'll see in theaters more than once, especially if it has like my faves in it, like if it has Guardians or like the Avengers I do like in or whatever. This one, I saw it once in theaters and I was like, yeah, I'm done. I don't need to see this again. And I haven't really been able to, I think I've only rewatched it in actually one sitting, like once, because it's like, it just gets so slow, like halfway through, that it's like, you're just like, do I want to dedicate 3 hours to this? And also, like, I feel like they, like, this is an issue that has affected multiple franchises like Star Wars and Game of Thrones. I feel like they fell victim to the whole spoiler phobia thing in pop culture right now, where they were like, oh my god, like, we don't want people to know how it's gonna end, so, like, we need to make the ending as unpredictable as possible, instead of making it an ending that people could naturally predict, because they draw conclusions from foreshadowing and from things being planted in the story and all that, which like would make sense. But spoilers, so we have to make it as unpredictable as possible. So Steve's ending, what the hell was that? It made no sense. Tony dying, why? Like, I get it, but also why? Natasha dying, I get it, but why? Why? Like, I feel like they were like, we need to make all these profound deaths happen now. But because they did it then, I was like, there was so much potential in these characters that you did not tap into, like, until they were dying. Oh, and then, of course, the scene that I was talking about earlier, as we all know, Natasha meets the same fate as somebody, Gamora. And I remember when that happened, I was sitting in the theater and I laughed. Because I was like, what? It was like the uncomfortable laugh of like, what the F is happening? Because I was like, is this real? Like, are they actually, because they literally copied the Gamora scene, like, verbatim, like, because they copied the music, and, like, all of that, like, they literally, it felt like a meme, So I was just like, bro, what? So I laughed when my comfort character of almost a decade died. I guess at that point 5 years died. I laughed and I was like, yep, okay, this makes sense.
I didn't really like
I don't think it was
Endgame
good.
in general. I did like the concept of it of like, okay, now let's circle back to all these places. I
Yeah,
just think it was poorly executed, and also the whole like
the
the
time
logic of
travel.
time traveling was
Oh my
confusing to
god, they were like,
understand.
cause I feel like the after Winter Soldier, like the Russo Bros, like got kind of. I feel like the success of Winter Soldier kind of got to their heads, and they were just like, look at us being like actually competent directors, and so like I feel like, cause I remember at the Endgame press, they kept being like, we consulted actual quantum physicists about time travel, and they told us like this whole thing about if you travel to the past is now your present, and like the present is your past, like what, like they were like, this is what the quantum physicists told us. And then like never mind the fact that Marcus and McFeely, the writers, like literally when they were interviewed separately about whether or not the time travel in Endgame was affecting a single timeline that the universe operated on, or if it was multiple timelines, what one pair said one answer and the other said the other answer. So I don't remember who said what, but basically the writers said it like said the opposite from the directors. So I don't even know if it's like one timeline or if it's multiple timelines. I don't know. All I know is that
It's
that
science.
in that one time where Steve and Tony went to like the 1980s, now in that one point in time there were three different Steve Rogers in that one point in time, because there was the one that time traveled with Tony, there was the one in the ice, and then there was the one that was old because he'd gone back to live with Peggy. So yeah, I don't know. I just
Yeah.
why. Also, the other thing that I guess is more like Infinity War related, but the way like after the snap happened and somebody asked the Russo Bros like, does the snap include like all organic life, like the plants and the animals? And the Russo Bros said yes. So like, what did the
So that
snap do?
just that like doesn't, well, because Thanos' whole thing was he was like there's the basically like population control, right?
Yes, he was saying
So
there's not enough resources for as much population as there is, which first
so
of
if you
all is a
kill
myth. So
so if you were like to kill like all organic life or like kill off half of organic life, then you would just be left with
you have the same
half.
proportional amount of like
Yeah.
natural resources. Like I guess you could say there's more land available because there's lots of people living on the land, but like the plants are gone, so like it's gonna take a while to grow your new fancy crops on this new land you got since the plants poofed. So
Yeah, and I think like after I think after watching Endgame and like trying to understand the science of it all, I think we were just like, you know what? If we just didn't think too hard about it, it would make sense.
yeah, like literally Infinity War and Endgame were like total do not, if as long as you don't use a single brain cell, like you're fine. But the moment that single brain cell starts to like turn a little bit, then you're like, oh wait, this was like actually not good. But it's okay because there's a worse Avengers movie. You know what movie that is? It's Age of Ultron, which is next on my list.
Yeah. I do like that shot though, like the money shot that they did of all of the Avengers fighting, like looking like a painting. That's the only thing
Yeah.
I liked about it. That's about it.
Yeah, Age of Ultron was an even worse sample for, oh, this is a reflection of how Joss Whedon is as a person, because just the whole the whole thing of shipping the Hulk with Natasha, the whole thing of shipping Bruce and Natasha, like for no reason, and them connecting over being monsters. Bruce being like, I'm a monster because I literally turn into a monster, and Natasha being like, I'm a monster not because I've like literally murdered children, but because I'm infertile. Like Joss Whedon really thought he did something with that, and instead just managed to like make us all be like, what? So now you're a monster if you can't naturally have children, apparently. That whole thing. And I thought this when I first saw Age of Ultron in high school when it came out, and I still think this now, but I really think that whole brief romance of Natasha and Bruce that just really read as like a self-insert fan fiction situation for Joss Whedon of him trying to ship himself with like this badass hot girl who's like too cool to just like too like I'm too busy being like a badass type person, and then he's just like the lowly nerd who's like I just have a heart of gold and I'm a little bit of a monster too, but like we share that. Why? Just why? And then like also just the introduction of Wanda and Pietro into the universe with this whole thing, and they completely butchered everything about them because in their attempt to like cut them off from the X-Men, which is like also another like pretty valid criticism of like WandaVision. Like they basically, because in the comics like Wanda and Pietro are literally like Romani and they're literally Jewish, and they're like, so then like first of all it's like why are they with Nazis in Age of Ultron? Like why are they in Hydra? And then I think, like, in WandaVision, I think she has, like, a cross in her bedroom, and she's, like, worn a cross necklace in, like, the movies before. So basically, she's not Jewish at all either now. And she was working with, like, Nazis just because. And, like, so they totally erased all that for, I don't know. I don't know why they had to erase that, to erase them being connected to Magneto, but, like, okay. And then did we need Vision? This is Vision origin story. Did we need that?
We and some of our other friends like to call him the smart toaster.
Yes. Literally, like, he's just basically just a living robot guy, which I guess, but I don't know why that literally, like, I don't know why he had to be the life that we were bargaining the whole universe for in Infinity War, but okay. But yeah, so that's Age of Ultron and Joss Whedon. I don't know if you have any other thoughts to add on that now that we're done with the Avengers movies.
I don't have any other thoughts. Okay. No, not really. Okay, moving on to the next one, because I have a question from one of our listeners.
Yes.
Regarding your next movies, because my cousin, Ian, has asked me to ask you a question, because Iron Man is her favorite Marvel superhero, and she loves the Iron Man movies, and she wants to know why Iron Man is in the C tier for you.
It's not personal. They're just not that memorable to me. And I think this is where the whole thing of all the Marvel movies are the same kind of started, because like I've seen all three of them multiple times, and so I know like what they're each about, but I just think like with characters that are like Tony, where it's like their whole thing is they're like they're like the lovable asshole with the heart of gold or whatever who like needs to learn to become a team player. I feel like when people write characters like that in any kind of franchise setting, they fall into the trap of like, okay, they make that character go through the development of like, okay, now they're not going to be like this selfish asshole who can't play on a team or whatever. And then when it comes time to tell a story about them again, that character has to go through the same development, like, again, and, like, it, like, between Iron Man and Iron Man 2, like, that's kind of, like, one arc I would consider, because it was first him becoming Iron Man, and then him, like, dying and stuff, but then, like, he goes through the Avengers movies, and gets to a point in Iron Man 3, where he's like, okay, I'm not gonna be Iron Man anymore, like, at the end, when he gets his arc reactor removed, and then he just rolls up in Age of Ultron, and is like, I'm here as Iron Man again, with no explanation, and I was just like, okay, like, I feel like it's just, like, I would have to rewatch them, like, back to back to back, and more, like, with a more attentive eye, I guess, to be like, okay, let's really map out his whole character arc, but I just feel like he kind of went through the same character arc, like, 3 times, I don't know, and it's like, I guess in hindsight, I might have put Age of Ultron below all these, like, because I just really hate Age of Ultron. I'm just really neutral towards, like, the Iron Man films. I would say the reason I put the first Iron Man at the bottom is because Don Cheadle isn't Rhodey yet.
Oh, that's right.
Don Cheadle's iconic. And then I actually recently rewatched Iron Man 2 with Laurel over, like, the Disney Plus group watch, and I just really hated Natasha's introduction. Like, I like that she starts out as, like, being part of Tony's story, because one of my bro TPs in the MCU is Natasha and Tony, because I feel like they have a lot of potential to be, like, a really cool, like, bro dynamic, but, like, she kind of just existed as eye candy in Iron Man 2. She was just, like, there, and she was like, yep, I'm a double agent, and I'm sexy, and then everybody was like, okay. So, like, Yeah, I don't know. They just none of them like stuck with me, I guess, even after like the times I've watched them. But I love Tony. Like a lot of people
Mm,
hate Tony. I really like Tony, and I'm sad that he died.
okay,
But
valid.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was that whole ending. I didn't really like the ending of Endgame.
Why did they give him a
The entirety of
kid?
Endgame I just didn't
The
like.
one who should have died is Steve. Okay, like I don't. Literally, out
Yeah.
of between the two of them to settle down and like actually live a whole life, it should not have been. It should not have been Steve because he was literally obsessed with like just fighting everybody. Like, okay,
I also just didn't like the actual ending with Steve going back in time
yeah,
and it's him dancing with
it
I
made
was
no
just
sense. It made no sense. Literally, how many movies before this did he spend like being like, "Oh my god, we need to find Bucky. I will literally let the whole world explode because I'm trying to find Bucky." And then finally he has a chance to just chill for 1 second and be like, "Okay, me and Bucky can just chill." And then he's like immediately he's like, "Actually, I don't care, bye." Like that literally made no sense. So, I was just like, "Okay, I guess." Which, ironically, that brings us to the movie that's kind of tucked into between the Iron Man movies here is the first Captain America movie. Because I also just thought it was just okay. And it wasn't, like, super memorable. I don't know. I don't know. It kind of just exists to me. I thought Peggy was cool. But, and then also my other thing, too, is, like, a lot of people really love Bucky. And I'm like, he's kind of, like, done nothing for, like, this whole time. Like, I'm like, I don't mean it to discredit Bucky. I think this is the fault of like the writers throughout this whole saga, in that they've basically made Bucky like have no agency and just exists as an like as a plot device for Steve
yeah.
for like a decade. Like
Yeah.
that's on them for doing that. So like Bucky stands can be stands or whatever, but I'm just like he literally hasn't even had the chance to do anything to like get my attention. Like he literally has just existed as like
I
an
mean yeah, but like
object of Steve's desire.
the good thing is though is that he has his show
Yes, I'm really excited
coming
for
up.
the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'm because if it goes anything like WandaVision, because my first reaction to WandaVision was like, oh my god, they have actual personalities. So I'm really hoping that's how. I mean, I would say Sam Wilson already has a pretty solid personality, and I really like his character. But maybe finally Bucky will get some personality. I mean, a
Hmm.
girl can dream, but Jesus, I just want to know what the appeal of this guy is because he's literally just done nothing for like 5 movies.
All right. And then let's go on to the very bottom tier.
Yes. Okay, I think with the C and D tier, I don't think I paid as much attention to the order I was dragging them into because Hulk is technically at the top of this tier. I have never seen this movie all the way through. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I've been an MCU stan for like almost 7 years now. I've never even bothered to touch this film because like why? And it's like barely even canon. It's also not even Mark Ruffalo, so it's like what? I think the only canon part that matters is at the end, like I think Tony shows up and talks to him at a bar, and then that's it.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. And then Thor Ragnarok, which
Or
I would put
Thor
Thor. I would put first Thor. Yeah, not Thor Ragnarok. Sorry, Thor: The Dark World. Which is the second Thor, which I would put the first Thor above this one. Yeah, they're just very not memorable, and I was literally just like, I literally, out of all the franchises, I was like the least interested in like Thor, because I don't know, these movies are just like not
yeah.
good.
Yeah, they're not really fun or entertaining.
They just literally exist, and like they have some jokes,
Yeah.
but then they try to take themselves a little like too seriously. It's just a dude wearing a cape and talking in like ye old
Hmm.
English, like it doesn't have to be that serious. So
Yeah.
Thor Ragnarok was like the ultimate like redemption for this franchise.
And then this is a you have a controversial pick for your bottom
Yeah,
movie.
Doctor
And let's
Strange.
yeah. Well, I have never seen Doctor Strange, so like I
I
don't.
watched it once because except for the Hulk, my thing, especially back when I was still writing like fanfic, I was like, oh, I need to know what's going on because I need to be able to write stuff and write these characters, so I need to know what's happening in the universe so I know what I'm doing. But so I watched this when it was on Netflix a couple years ago, and it was just like not. It wasn't It wasn't, as a movie. It wasn't even that memorable to me. But it also just had so many issues with like which originated in the comics that they could have like fixed here, but like they didn't. And so the main issue, and to the point where I've used this film in my Asian American studies as a popular example of this issue. So this falls into kind of the thing of Orientalism, which is kind of basically just like commodifying like Asian culture. Well, first of all, assuming Asian culture is one monolithic thing, and then just kind of turning it into this like product for consumption, and like using like this whole idea of like Asian mystic arts and stuff, and like magic and martial arts and ooh, like that kind of stuff. And it's just like the white people get to do this magic Asian stuff, like ooh, they wave their hands and then this mystical power comes out and then they defeat their enemies, blah blah blah. Like that whole thing is literally just Doctor Strange. And in the movie, like the ancient one or whatever, where they made what's her face play,
Oh, Tilda Swinton.
which the ancient one was like the one like major Asian character, I believe, in the original Doctor Strange story. But they, which I forget the whole like backstory of this, but basically they changed like the location of where he goes to study and the race of the ancient one to like, it was basically Marvel trying to like appeal, I think, to the Chinese government so that they wouldn't block the movie from being showed in China. I'm not 100% on all this because it's been a few years now, but basically a lot of like those like decisions were really big, like they were largely influenced on that whole thing of like, we need to still keep the Chinese market so we can make a ton of money, so let's just change the story to appeal to like the Chinese Communist Party's like stuff. So there was that whole thing, and it's like, I mean, like, so I feel like this story, like when they were adapting it, what could have really like kind of taken it away from all those problems, like if they'd gotten actual like, first of all, if they'd pinpointed one actual culture, Asian culture, to focus on, not just like Asians and their magic, be like, oh, we're gonna make this a Chinese story or make this a Korean story, whatever, like, and they're like, let's pinpoint one culture, let's hire people from that background to then be working on this as a director, as a writer, whatever. Let's turn this, like, I think it could have really worked as like a, you know, an Asian American, like someone living in the diaspora and then going home and like connecting with his culture and then getting these powers or whatever. Like, obviously it'll still kind of fall into this whole idea, like this whole myth of like Asian culture is like magic and voodoo and all that, which like that's a whole issue, but like it would have felt a lot better if it was actually like a story about, you know, a person in the diaspora like going home and like learning all this while learning more about themselves and their background and all that, and then using that as like a power that they could like fight with and stuff. That would have been really cool. But instead it was just Benedict Cumberbatch, Benedict Cucumber, Cabbage Patch Kids, whatever, Sherlock himself. It was just him playing this asshole character who was like Tony Stark 2.0, but a surgeon instead, for like 2 hours. And I was just like, okay. So I don't know, like I was just like, I guess, like I get that they had to do it because the time stone, they had to introduce the time stone, but it really was not that memorable to me. And just the fact that I could use it so easily as an example of, this is a bad representation of Asian cultures in my literal classes in college. Like, I was like, cool, that's great. Which, this is to say, too, that a lot of, like, the MCU movies have a lot of issues with, like, representation. Like, the Ant-Man movies really just made, what's-his-face's character, Luis, he's, like, literally just, like, stereotypical Latino for, like, laughs.
Oh, what's his name? Michael Pena.
Yeah, like, his character is, like, funny, but it's, like, stereotypical Latino. And he's like, oh, my dad got deported. Oh, I'm, like, kind of, like, all these traits that are, like, stereotypical Latino man. Either support or hindrance to the white hero. Mantis was treated horribly in Guardians 2, and then Drax just belittled her all the time. And they also, apparently Mantis in the comics was, like, really high power, and then they like made her just kind of weak in the Guardians movies. Also, the fact that the Guardians franchise is the most diverse one, but of course it's the one franchise where most of the characters are not human. So of course the one franchise where it's mostly people of color, they're not even humans. So that's great. Like, literally, like, all these movies are just like they're just not it for like representation. Like, literally the real Asian American rep we got, is like that one doctor lady in Age of Ultron who never gets seen again, Dr. Helen Cho.
Oh, and then
every time they go to fight in an Asian country like South Korea or Hong Kong or wherever, and they just fight there and then they leave. Or when Hawkeye was going on his whole revenge against the universe thing in Endgame,
going through his weeb,
and he was like, going through his emo weeb phase, and he was just killing Yakuza people. And I was like, all right, like, this is not the movie franchise for Asian people as it is right now. But
at at the end of the day, though, I feel like I'm a little bit hopeful for the movies that are
Oh,
going to
for
come
sure.
out.
I'm really upset that this is like that COVID is happening. Like, I mean, obviously everyone's upset about COVID, but in terms of the MCU, pretending the rest of the world doesn't exist, of all the time for the MCU to be disrupted, I'm really disappointed it's now because they were like on the brink of finally letting people of color come in and tell their own stories featuring people of color. And it's also, I think it's really sad too because like a lot of like the people I knew just from like being in fandom spaces online who were just really into the MCU like for the last like few years, like so many people have just been completely burned out by the whole Infinity War saga and just how many things like went wrong with like a lot of like characters and stuff between Infinity War and Endgame and like all the movies before that. Like that was kind of a final straw moment for a lot of people where it's like, you know, they're just not as into it anymore. And like obviously I'm still into Marvel a lot and I still follow it, but even I feel like I barely like I was watching WandaVision and there was like the whole stuff with Sword and I was like, you know, 5 years ago I totally would have been like, oh my god, I know exactly why this is here. I know exactly, and I was like, I don't even know that stuff anymore. Like I've been so burned out since like Endgame where it's like I kind of purged a bunch of the Marvel brain cells from my head because I was like, I'm kind of done with this right now because literally it was so frustrating. And of course,
Mhm.
after they do that and make everybody pissed off, that's when they're like, okay, now the people of color can come in with their movies, which obviously I'm
Yeah.
glad it's happening. It's just really disappointing because there's like a lot of people I know from like Tumblr and stuff who just are barely following MCU anymore because they've been so burnt out, and it's like now they're gonna miss this stuff that's gonna be probably really good
Mm-hmm.
and really nice for like
Yeah.
representation, but we can't have nice things ever, so here we are.
I just wanted to say that, like, I think the movie that I'm most looking forward to for the next slate of Marvel movies to come out is The Eternals because
Mm-hmm.
Chloe Zhao has been, like, on my watch for a while. Like, I watched her films, her first couple features, and I, like, really love them. And then she's on, like, the Oscar watch list right now and, like, getting nominated for all these awards for Nomadland. And then, which, like, first of all, these movies are very, like, indie quiet films that don't require a lot of VFX or crew to make, and now she's making a whole Marvel movie. So
Yes,
I'm excited to see what she's gonna come up with.
me
I think her
too.
voice is really cool.
And it's just like now
Yeah.
it's like now that we're kind of done with like the OG6 Avengers and those actors, we're finally like now when I think of like actors in upcoming Marvel movies, I'm thinking like Simu Liu and like Kumail Nanjiani and like Gemma Chan is coming back because I think they realized that was stupid to like waste her on a character who's just gonna die in
Yeah.
one movie, and like just all those kinds of people now where I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, like the what like the trilogy movies that have yet to finish now, like Black Panther and like Captain Marvel, like I'm much more excited for like their next films than like I was for like the next Iron Man film or the next Thor film back in the
Oh, I
day.
mean, like, well, I'm very much hoping that for Captain Marvel 2 because they got Nia DaCosta, who is
Mhm.
like this black woman director who directed the new Candyman remake coming out. I'm really excited for her because the Marvel movies to like writers and directors who actually like have a voice and like know how to recontextualize their own experiences
Mhm.
and their own like life into these characters in these movies, and it's very refreshing to
I
see, you
know. Like
know.
it feels like so much more personal than just someone approaching it as, "Oh my gosh, I just love watching like Captain America like punch people for 2 hours." Like it's so nice to not have people with that approach anymore.
Yeah.
So, I'm hopeful. I like first of all, can we just get Black Widow on Disney Plus? Like I'm tired of waiting and I just really want to put like since Natasha was such an important character to me for so long and like such a big part of like my I guess formative years in high school and stuff and as a creative, like I just really want to be able to lay that to rest now that she's dead. So like first of all she's dead and now we're just waiting in limbo for this movie. Like I would just much rather just be able to be done with this now and just emotionally move on with my life and like focus on these newer characters. And you know, maybe one of them will be my new Natasha or something. But I need Natasha to exit the stage now. But like
Hmm.
I don't know what Disney's doing. They're too busy shutting down studios like Blue Sky. I don't know. They're
I think we're just gonna leave it at that.
yes, release Black Widow. That's my ending note.
Well, thanks everyone for listening to another episode.
Yeah.
This episode has really been a
Headache. I feel like it relieves my
show.
headache to get out my Marvel headache stresses.
Oh, that's good.
Well, if you let me know your hot takes, DM me or whatever, and tell me if I'm wrong. But if you do, I'm not gonna agree.
Okay, thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeet. Bye.